Welcome back, everybody, to the Sexy Business Podcast. We've got another very special guest episode coming to you today. But as always, I'm Spooky Dangerous and I'm joined by Lewd Neko. And this time we have the developer from Benefitship, Mad, joining us this time. Say hello.
Hello.
So I wanted to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself in a second, but long-term fans of the channel, and because we know we have so many people that watch every single episode end to end, those of you that might know episode 21, we did actually talk about a series of tweets that you did where you came out and you talked a lot about some of the behind the curtain analytics about your project. And we wanted to bring you on so that we can come, ask you direct questions and elaborate on that a little bit, which is kind of how we've, encountered you generally. But I would like to know a little bit about who you are and some of the projects that you've worked on before we get to that.
Of course. Well, I mean, the main thing that I've done is Benefitship. It's my pretty much first like real project, I guess you could say, real game, if you consider a visual novel a game. It's yeah, it's the first thing I've ever actually released that is in a state where it could be sold on Steam and itch.io and not just like a tiny prototype. Uh, so I'm quite happy with it.
And it seems like it's been going pretty well so far. But what got you started working in game dev? What reached out to you that made you feel like you had to make Benefitship?
Well, see, I've wanted to make games since I was like 10 years old, and even
Aw.
more so when, yeah, right, yeah, little baby Mad over there wanting to make video games. Also, not so coincidentally, same time I started programming, so that's sort of a correlation there. And then even more so when I played Undertale a couple of years later, whenever that was. Uh, I think I really knew that I wanted to make video games then. And you need a starting point. I've sort of had a long time then to study game design and what kind of stuff I want to make and how to make it, and music and programming and writing and all these sorts of things. And I figure, it's best to start small and simple. And what's simpler than a visual novel? Of course, visual novels are pretty hard to sell, so a hook of some kind might be advisable, and thus the hook, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Fudanari, a very literal hook.
Very, very literal hook.
It sounds like do you eventually want to make games outside of visual novels?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I've actually been working on. I'm out of a job right now. Company went bankrupt. It happens. So I've had a lot of
Oh.
time here over New Year's. Yeah, right. So I've had a lot of time, yeah, over New Year's to just write down notes. So I've spent the past week or two writing down ideas and concepts and fleshing it out with game design and all sorts of stuff. It's about 20-page document now, I think.
Oh.
Damn, nice.
Yeah. So that is something that I will be working on prototypes for soon, but it is in the safe phase, shall we call it? Um, so it's not something that's going to be the main focus right now because I've got a bunch of other games or visual novels here uh, running that I've got to finish first.
Yeah, well, because we've seen a lot of Benefitship, and it's in kind of I don't know, a completed state. And then you've just started up a new one, which I've seen, which is Born to Breed as well. What do you feel like the
Yes.
gap between going from game one to game two has been like?
Well, depends on what you mean about when you say gap.
Uh, so is there like a big skill increase? Like, is it going to be a much more technically difficult to create game, or are you focusing more on individual parts, or like the storytelling, or are you just trying to use the same recipe because it's like a brand development kind of project?
Well, it's originally it was supposed to be a lot more about trying new things, but I ran into a massive barrier with the story. I just could not get the concept to work at all. I have done, I don't know how many drafts before I finally managed to put something together that works. And what worked just didn't fit with some of the ideas about choice and meta
Mm.
narrative and multiple endings that I had. So I went in a slightly safer direction, but I am doing some things that are different from Benefitship. For instance, the story is a lot more coherent, a lot more linear, and a lot more plot focused as well,
Okay.
rather than just being character focused. There's a bunch of like lore and fantasy world building and stuff, and live 2D. There's a live 2D integration for
Ooh.
some of this pretty much all of the NSFW scenes actually
Mm.
have live 2D animations, and that's just to try live 2D animations mainly because that was one of the criticisms that we sort of got, or the feedback that we got for Benefitship was that a lot of people really wished that it had had animations.
Yeah, and that's
I
something that
mean,
I
I
did want to ask you about. What has the fan reception been like? Because you've been really kind of open with the process and like kind of your results and stuff like that. But what's kind of been the general sentiment behind the game and what they think of, which is really just your first project?
Well, to put it simply, it's been overwhelmingly positive in
yay.
a rather literal sense, actually, because on Steam we are now closing in on reaching overwhelmingly positive. We have the correct percentage, which is, I believe, 96% positive reviews we have, but you need 500 reviews or something to
Ooh.
actually count for overwhelmingly positive, and we're at 350 something. So I'm hoping in a couple of months we will hopefully be reaching overwhelmingly positive reviews
It
on
sounds
Steam.
positive.
It is very positive. I have gotten a lot of feedback, a lot of criticism as well. I did make a post about that alongside the sales reports and stuff. I made the common criticisms, uh, common criticisms,
And is
where
that
I
a
made
thing
this
that you
list of.
think you've used to design the next game around? Like you're like, okay, people wanted this, or I did this poorly, and then you've now used that as the backbone to create the next game?
Oh, absolutely. That's quite literally. I mean, I have the list here. Number one is it was too short. Number two is it had no animation. Number three is that the story could have been paced better. So yeah, I definitely took inspiration from the common criticisms list to try to improve on the next game.
Too short is such a funny thing to me because it's like, are you really gooning your shit for the entire hour? Have you not come before this point? What more do you need, sir? I've had similar complaints about that where they're like, oh, I played from one end to the other, and it's like, it's not a linear game, it's really wide, not long. And it's, yeah, it's not the same thing. I feel like some of the criticisms received, it's easy to dismiss because you're like, well, you interacted with the product incorrectly, I suppose.
Mm.
Yeah, but it varies a bit because sometimes there are criticisms that I get that I'm like, okay, you just don't want my product is
Yeah,
what you don't want. For example, I had some people wish for a male protagonist. That's not my product. That's
yeah.
literally just a different game. That's not what you want. That's like going into Hades and complaining that it's not a third person shooter, right? It's just not the product you want. But there are plenty of games with male protagonists out there. But I did get some very fair criticism as well. A lot of really good feedback. I read every single review, no exceptions. All the positive, all the negative. I have a tab in my browser, so I open it every morning and look at what the newest reviews are,
Yeah,
and then
I'm
I
the
take
same.
notes.
I get that, and I've got Steamworks for each of my games, so I literally look at uh, total total revenue generated. I look at the average player time pretty much 20 times a day because I open all of my tabs in one go and slowly click through them to see if there's any notifications I have to clear.
Mm.
It's probably not healthy, but I get excited whenever there's itch.io notification. I see what some of the other games that are coming along, or I see a whole bunch of purchases have shown up, or a sale that I forgot I opted into, which is always nice. But it does remind me, you did post a bunch of sales data in that original post that we were talking about, and that was about 4 months ago. So now in that time, we've had the autumn sale and we've had the winter sale. Have you had like a big spike in interest over this period of time?
Oh, absolutely. Like an absurdly high level of interest. Like when the game released, we had about 314 sales in one day, and when we did the autumn sale, we had the exact same number of sales,
Nice.
uh, which is a massive spike. It's like 600% our usual daily sales during that short period of autumn sales.
Yeah, no, that's
It
good.
was quite absurd. Winter sale was a bit less extreme, about half of the autumn sale, but it was also over twice as long a period, so the end result is actually the
Mm.
exact same.
Hmm.
I mean, we've talked a little bit about like the issue of like selling visual novels is that they don't quite fit into the market of how you would sell like a movie, a book, or a game. They're sort of like its own little economy. And I think oftentimes on Steam, what you encounter are people who are comparing the prices of visual novels to the price of like a triple A game or something like that. And it's just not really comparable. Like, as you mentioned when you talked about like designing this upcoming story, like you have these giant documents, you've done multiple drafts. People don't really take in the consideration the effort and labor that writing a story takes to begin with, much less a non-linear one where you have to think about how does this thing interact with this other thing. Do I want these choices to be connected? Do I want them to be completely separate routes? If you change something in the route, you got to edit a bunch of other stuff. And that's what I usually think about when I'm going to buy a game is like, is the story like comparable to more of like a novel, or even a movie? I mean, your game is about like an hour and a half long. Most movies these days, to get a ticket in like America is like 11, $15 depending on where you live. And that's for me to sit in a theater and watch a movie once and not even own it, which is very different from being able to like buy Benefitship, enjoy the story, and if you ever want to return to the art, you have it and you can jerk your shit then.
Yeah, of course. But on the other hand, people mainly just care about having a product that feels like what they paid for. They don't want to pay for how much you spent on it. Like if you did that, like Benefitship cost like almost $14,000 to create, right? If every single person had to pay that amount, which is technically what it's worth, it is technically worth $14,000. Nobody's gonna pay that. So you gotta be a bit lenient. Benefitship is like $3, $2.99, I think is the exact price, which is very low even for a visual novel, and that's
Mm.
deliberate, right? It's selling in volume rather than trying to sell as a luxury, where you sell like to one person for $10,000, as opposed to selling to 10,000 people for $1. And I
Mm.
prefer the latter.
Yeah, and it does help you build an audience, which means that your second project, your third project, you have a bit more of a built-in audience, and then if you have a bit more of a more deluxe product, it's going to be easier to go, hey, here's a $5 game, here's a $7 game. As you ramp up, add more skill, add more features. Uh, THM has actually done the opposite. We opened with Shackles of Elswyn at 10.99, but we opt into every single sale possible. So it's very often it is $5. And then Sleeve Shock Game 2 is 7.99, and then Cufflinks and Cages Game 3 is 4.99. And
That's an interesting direction.
yeah, our sales data actually shows that Shackles of Elswyn is much better than the other two by orders of magnitude. But the difference is it's had an extra 18 months, 20 months on game two. So I'm curious to see what will happen when game two hits that same uptime, if it will actually approach the same threshold.
Well, it's also right. Like not every game made by the same person or the same people sells the same. Every game hits
Hmm.
a different audience. Every game has a different artist. Even AAA games, they never sell the exact same amounts. So you always gotta account for, like, for Born to Breed, I'm fully expecting that we will sell half as many copies as Benefitship, if not less. And I always work under that assumption that we won't sell as well as Benefitship. I mean, when I made Benefitship, I was fully prepared for it to not even break even.
Hmm. And you kind of have to be. You just kind of do it for the passion, for the love of it, and then if it becomes worth your time, then that's great. I
Of
Yeah.
do,
course,
I do wonder, is some of that to the star power of the artist that you have attached? Uh, I'm just going to
oh,
go ahead and assume the pronunciation is Sulkete or
I
Soulcate, or who fucking knows, honestly.
literally do not know.
Yeah.
I always assumed it was Soulcate, but
Okay. Yeah.
that's just because it seems like it would roll off the
The
tongue a bit
easiest way
better
to say
than.
it. But yeah, Soulcate
Yes.
has a huge audience, and it's like 4 times the size of Cubes, which was the artist that we used to kick off our first project. And I'm pretty sure Soulcate has almost exactly 4 times the size of the audience. So I can understand that when we had our star power behind our first game, it gave us a gigantic, good first impression. That what Soulcate was able to do is the same kind of thing, and then trying to do any project detached from that same artist is difficult and is going to be hard to sell to those original investors in a way, those first game buyers, that it is going to be the same and it is going to be as good.
Yes, but also no. I mean, people definitely notice the change in artist, no doubt about that. And a lot of people definitely bought the game initially because we had Sulcate attached to it. But a lot of the people on Steam, they just pass by the game as they're scrolling through and they see the art, and the art looks good, and so they buy the game.
Yeah,
Now,
absolutely.
we definitely got a big boost of reviews, you could say, a lot of wish lists, a lot of reviews from that initial boost from Soulcate, which means that we got pushed higher up on all the different lists of top sellers and what have you. I mean, even today, if you go on itch.io, go to the top sellers list, Benefitship is still on that list to this day. And
Hey.
that's right, it's pretty good. But it's not because people know who Soulcate is. I'm sure there are some among the buyers who know who he is, but it's because of how good the art is, right? And so theoretically, if you can find another artist who also makes great art, even if they aren't as well known, you can still get sales, I think.
You
Yeah,
said,
I think especially there's been like a lot of AI slop
oh, for
showing up on
real.
Steam and itch.io lately. And I can't really say for the general public, but I can always like sort of like recognize it after a little bit, especially after looking at the page and stuff like that. And it makes me appreciate even more like the unique art styles or just seeing like little details in the CGs. Like the art is like really good, and for a visual novel, you're going to be staring at these sprites the entire time. So you want it to be expressive and you want it to be unique and sort of memorable. And I definitely think that's one of the benefits of this game and possibly like why
But
it's still on the front page of itch.io, because itch.io especially has a lot of AI stuff as well as like Koei Katsu and like Honey Select stuff. So like things that are generic. So when you have like an art style that is unique, I think people are drawn towards it.
yeah, I'm sure they are. But honestly, a lot of it is just for me the you put in more passion, put in more effort. It's like the difference between buying a ready-made meal and making that exact same meal yourself. The meal you
Mm,
made yourself just tastes way better because you know you made it yourself.
yeah. Now, shifting direction just a little bit, because we've talked a lot about sort of the business aspect of things, but we also just kind of want to know more about you as like a creator and things like that. So we like asking like what was the kind of origin story of your interest in like hentai or adult games? Like what was your like first did you something that you encountered when you were younger? Did you get into it more as you grew up? Were there any like specific pieces of media? And then like if you want to talk any a bit about like Fudanari, like maybe what drew you to using that for like your first game.
Hmm. Well, it's tough to say exactly what got me into it because how shall we put this? I started early, probably too early to be honest. But you can't travel back in time. Plus, it turned out okay after all. So I have no idea what got me into any of this to begin with. I know honestly, I'm not sure about any of that. I just don't have that information. Now, as for why I chose to go for Fudanari for Benefitship, it's just because I like cute girls and writing something that's just in SFW with two cute girls is difficult because you are somewhat, at least difficult for me, because you're more limited in, well, you can't do, you know, thing goes in, thing goes out. You're kind of limited to surface stuff or toys and such, and so it made more sense, I guess, to go for Fudanari because then you can have two cute girls, and also it made sense for the story, right? You've got an apartment. It made sense that the two roommates would be of the same gender, and as such, the story just sort of naturally unfolds, right? It wouldn't be quite as logical, I guess, if
Yeah.
the protagonist was a guy, for instance, instead of a Fudanari, because then you've suddenly got like this weird roommate situation that you've seen a lot of more adult content where it doesn't really make sense that they would be in the same apartment, like sharing such a close roommate situation. And I do try to go for slightly more realistic, if that makes any sense
Yeah.
in this genre,
Yeah.
sort of slightly more slightly more realistic vibe with the personalities and the relationships and the design and how they act and how they think and stuff.
More
Honestly,
grounded.
More
you could have
grounded,
stopped
that's a
at
good way
like
of putting it.
all you need to say was I wanted to look at cute girls, and I would have been like, you know what, based.
Yeah, you had this in
I
the first
also like
line.
cute girls.
Yeah, I mean, fair. That is basically the that is basically the basis for everything I make. Is just put a cute girl in it, and you've got thumbnail material, right? That's the biggest
True.
thing, really. Cute girl is great thumbnail material.
I mean, this is literally in a YouTube video, which is going to have a YouTube thumbnail of a cute girl,
I
and
know.
people watching this video will experience this moment and see it all unfold and come together and understand.
Meta.
Yeah.
Right, you get that Chris Pratt Guardians of the Galaxy 2 moment where it like zooms
Yeah.
in on his face.
Yeah, exactly.
When it comes to like game creation or just like art writing things like that in general, do you have any like artistic inspirations? This could be like other visual novels you maybe really enjoyed, or even like regular novels or shows or movies or porn or anything like that. Did you have some form of inspiration, or was it just kind of like going off the dome?
Well, I mean, everything is an inspiration, right? Okay, that sounded really like pretentious and like Godfather, but it's nothing is original, as they say. Everything is built on something that came before it. Man, this is
Mm.
sounding more and more pretentious as I'm saying the words out loud. I've read Harry Potter a lot, like a lot. Like at the library when I was a kid, the librarians knew my name because I was there to read Harry Potter all the time. And I've really thought a lot about how Harry Potter is tied together, like how it's written, how it ends, how each book sort of has a coherent story, how all the characters feel real and all that stuff. And I try to sort of work with that in my mind when I'm when I'm creating something, not like deliberately, but like subconsciously, if that
Yeah.
makes any level of sense. But I'm very drawn to bittersweet things, like Nier Automata is an excellent example of something that is
Ooh.
bittersweet. Mass Effect also rather bittersweet, and I quite like more like fourth wall breaking meta narrative stuff. Again, Nier Automata, excellent example. Doki Doki Literature Club, and recently I know Miside or My Side, depending on how you pronounce that, was
Yeah,
also
that
released.
one's been blowing up really
Yes,
hard lately too.
yeah. It I haven't played it, but I watched Markiplier play it.
Classic.
So yeah. Mm. But yeah, I mean, I just like things that are bittersweet and sort of feel real or grounded on some level, as you said. But it's not like a conscious uh, conscious inspiration. I've got three documents. One of them is NSFW, one of them is SFW, and one of them is sort of my magnum opus. Both of the documents, SFW and NSFW, are both 120 pages long.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and that is every idea and every thought about anything I ever wanted to create since I was like 14 years old. So
Wow.
believe me, it's got a lot of stuff that I can go off of.
That's amazing. Well, it sounds like you have a lot planned for the future. Do you want to tell us a little bit about some of the stuff you're working on? You talked a little bit about your next game, Born to Breed. Would you like to give us sort of like a summary or like a teaser?
Sure, I guess you could call it like a dark fantasy sort of story with honestly, I don't know how to describe my stories because they are very character heavy. It doesn't have like a plot as such. There's world and there's lore, and there are characters that play off of each other. There's a demon and a priestess. The priestess is an elf, if that's your thing, and it sort of plays off of their relationship and how they sort of hate each other. I guess you could say it's like an enemies to lovers sort of thing.
Ooh.
Um, but
Classic.
it's yeah, it is classic. But I didn't go into it thinking I was gonna make enemies to lovers. I went into it thinking that I was gonna make something with a demon and sort of an elven priestess, and it just ended up being enemies to lovers. But yeah, there's Born to Breed and there's Benefitship 2, which I'm also working on currently, which is exciting. And I'm doing a little other side project, which is gonna be smaller and quicker and no voice acting. It's gonna be out in like a month or
Oh
so,
shit.
maybe. Yeah,
That's exciting.
yeah, it is. It's a collaboration actually with the developer of Champion of Venus.
Ooh.
Okay, cool.
We love a good NSFW collab.
Hmm.
Yes, I know.
All right, so we have a very, very important final question for you. Who's your number one waifu?
Probably Tally from Mass Effect.
Okay, yeah, I see it. She's
Yeah, yeah.
definitely a
I mean,
fan
if we're
favorite.
undoubtedly. I mean, if we're talking non-anime stuff, it's got to be probably Tally. If we're talking more anime stuff, maybe like 2B or something, also a classic.
Hmm. I mean, I've seen
Robot
2B
fucker.
climb a ladder. I don't think I needed any other information to support.
Fair, fair, fair.
All right. Well, that is our episode of the Sexy Business Podcast. It's been lovely to have you. I do like it when we can have somebody come on that we can kind of talk about the more here is me doing the job kind of a thing. Because I know that there's going to be people out there listening to this that are like, man, I've had some sexy encounters in my life. I wish that I could tell sexy stories and make games just like this. And I'm here to tell you it's very easy, actually. Anyone can do it, and I firmly believe that. And sometimes it just takes people like us talking about it and making it feel accomplishable that does make it feel like a journey that people can embark on. And so I do like coming in and asking some of the hard hitting questions about money and sales and all of that kind of crazy analytic stuff. But also, it is nice for us to get to know you as a person behind the screen and ask you some punchy personal questions. And for all of you at home, that is kind of what we're hoping for the Sexy Business podcast to be. We want to talk a little bit about some of the things behind the curtain in the NSFW space so that you can get an idea of what all of the effort that is required to come together to make cool games like this. Now, before we let you all go, did you want to shout out your socials? Where can people find you?
Well, we've got two Twitter accounts or X accounts, depending on, which side of the coin you're on. One of them is called Benefitship Game, and the other one is called RFH Games. And you can either go check them out or you cannot check them out and just go look at. I know people uploaded the Benefitship CGs to Rule 34. So
Yeah,
if you don't want to buy
yeah.
the game, go to Rule 34 and enjoy the pictures, I guess.
Yeah, weirdly advocate of pirate here myself. We have the exact same situation. All of our games are on F95 zone where people can illegally download, and that's totally fine with me. But that is going to be the wrap to this episode. So if you have made it this far in, you are at the 31 minutes 22 seconds mark. You owe me a click of the subscribe button. That's it. We earned it, actually. We worked very hard for it. And it's time to pay up. This is a subscribe button robbery. Put your fingers on the button. And we will see you next time in much less hostile terms, I promise. We're actually really nice people. Just please click the button.